So yesterday we met Kumbhakarna, and today we're going to watch him in action. And then the son, one of the second son of Ravana, is also going to be introduced on stage, the battlefield. A topic that was brought up yesterday, didn't get resolved, had to do with the age of Sita and Ram when they're married. It was a discussion yesterday. And it's confirmed, at least between Vrindanath and myself, there was a difference about the age difference between Ram and Sita. But we both, so when Sita meets with Ravan, or Ravan comes and introduces himself disguised as a Brahmana at Panchavati, he asks about her, what's she doing in the forest, etc. She gives her background, and there she says that she's the son of Janak, and when she was 9 years old, she married. Then later, when Maricha is speaking with Ravan, Ravan came to visit Maricha saying, help me to kidnap Sita. Maricha gives some additional information. There Sita also says to Ravan that she resided in Ayodhya for 12 years. So usually 9 plus 12 equals 21. So she was 21 when the exile happened, and it was 13 years later, because it was 14 years of exile, around 13 years later that she was kidnapped. So add 21 and 13, that's when she was kidnapped. And 1 year later is when they returned to Ayodhya. So it just gives some perspective. And then in Maricha's talk with Ravan, he says, in Valmiki Ramayana, Maricha says that Ram was only 12 when he killed his mother and his brother. Whereas when Vishvamitra Muni comes, Vishvamitra Muni was told by Dasrath he's not even 16. No, 12 is less than 16. But 16 is an age at which lessons in military skills are learned and one becomes eligible normally, according to Kshatriya codes, to engage in utilizing those military skills, engaging in battle or warfare or something. He's not even 16. So that was the 16 mentioned. So the question was, so I sent this information to Vrindanath, who said, I don't know the scriptural reference. I remember reading somewhere or something, so he's going to do some further referencing. But he remembers the age difference being 7. So if she was 9, he was 16 when they were married. And another thing he remembers is when they returned to Ayodhya and he was given the crown by Bharat, he was 40, she was 33. That's his memory. And thus 7 years difference. So he's going to do some research. But at least the research that I did said 12 and 9. just 4 years difference. It's not a big deal. It's just getting a picture of their ages and their difference of their ages. Interestingly, we were reading yesterday, and what's the age difference between the four brothers? Ram was. I'll give you the detail. There's different sources, but one very clear source says, according to the movement of the moon through the nakshatras, Bharata was born the next day, and the twins were born the next day. But Lakshman he's like 2 days, younger than Ram, and he's, the young Lakshman went to do some battle, and, he's just 2 days different from Ram. But still honoring him as the older brother, etc. It's, culture is very different today. Okay, so Kumbhakarna insulted Ravan. Ravan didn't like what he said. Mahodara supported Ravan. And Kumbhakarna said, don't worry, I'm going to go off and I'll destroy everybody. And Ravan is really fired up. The last paragraph. Ravana laughed heartily to see his brother's resolve. Surely he would now be saved. Now, confirmed, there is no mention like this that in Valmiki Ramayana. Ravana was thinking, he was such a proud person. He wasn't thinking, now I'm going to be saved by my brother. But in any case, no one could face Kumbhakarna and live. This would be a glorious day for the Rakshasas. Ravana sprang up and placed a beautiful gold necklace around his brother's neck. He also adorned him with numerous other gold, gem-studded ornaments, and had many fragrant garlands placed on him. Kumbhakarna donned an impenetrable golden coat of mail and a huge dark blue girdle. As he marched out for battle, he shone like the western mountains receiving the setting sun. He went first to Ravana's weapon room and took up a great pike, which was embellished with gold and which emitted flames even as it lay there. It shone like Indra's thunderbolt and was no less powerful. The pike was wreathed with garlands of crimson flowers and smeared with the finest sandal paste. Clutching his fierce weapon, the demon stormed toward the city gates. Thousands of drums were beaten and conches blew. Kumbhakarna assumed a form 600 bow lengths high. He knew how to make himself big. That's 600 bow lengths. Whatever a bow length is. And more than 100 in breadth. So 6 times 1. He strode towards the battlefield, surrounded by gigantic Rakshasas driving chariots and mounted upon elephants. Others followed him on camels, donkeys, lions, serpents, antelopes, and birds. The Rakshasas, who all had terrifying forms and faces, raised their maces, swords, lances, bludgeons, and bows, sending up a terrific roar. As the Rakshasas moved off, there were many grim omens. Massive gray clouds full of thunder and lightning covered the sky. The earth shook. Birds wheeled from right to left, and a large vulture perched on Kumbhakarna's pike. The Rakshasas left eye and arm throbbed. A flaming meteor fell from the sky and descended to the ground with a terrible crash. Jackals howled, and a strong wind blew in their faces. Kumbhakarna paid no heed to the omens. He stepped over Lanka's defensive wall and laughed out loud. The Rakshasa gazed around at the army of monkeys, which appeared like a mass of clouds. Seeing the stupendous Raksasa's sudden appearance, the monkeys dispersed in all directions, even as clouds are scattered by a gale. Kumbhakarna roared repeatedly, filling the four quarters with an unbearable thundering, which agitated the ocean and made the mountains quake. Numerous monkeys fell unconscious simply from hearing the sound. Others fled, screeching in terror. As the monkeys stampeded, Angada called out to them, "Have you forgotten your prowess, your valor, and your lineage? Why are you fleeing like ordinary monkeys? This gigantic nightmare of a Rakshasa will not be able to stand for long against us, protected as we are by Ram and Lakshman. Stand and fight, O Vanaras." The monkeys regained confidence upon hearing Angada's words. Turning back and taking hold of trees and rocks, they stood firm as Kumbhakarna rushed towards them. They smashed the Rakshasa with mountain peaks and fully grown trees, but these had no effect whatsoever, falling shattered to the ground. Kumbhakarna reached down and scooped up hundreds of monkeys. He dashed them furiously to the earth. The Rakshasa began destroying the ranks of the Vanara troops like a fire consuming dry wood. Innumerable, huge monkeys soon lay senseless on the ground, covered with blood. The monkeys again hastily retreated. They bounded away without looking back or sideways. Some rushed back over the ocean bridge. Others were seen sailing through the air, having been struck or tossed by the Rakshasa. With their faces turned pale, the monkeys scrambled up mountains or dived into the sea. Bears climbed trees and hid in caves. The whole army ran in fear, not knowing which way to turn. Angada tried again and again to rally the monkeys. He called out to them, "Come back! Where will you hide from this monster? He must be faced. What will you say to your wives? After you have fled in fear from the battlefield, have you forgotten your boasting words? We shall annihilate the Rakshasas. Have you become such cowards? No regions of bliss are ever attained by cowards. Indeed, they are always condemned by good men." Although Angad tried in many ways to convince his troops to fight, they would not listen. They continued fleeing, some of them replying to the prince as they ran, "This Rakshasa cannot be faced in battle. This is no time to exhibit bravery, for life is dear. We're going." Although their troops fled in all directions, Angada and Sugriva remained firm, along with Hanuman and some of the other powerful commanders of the monkey troops. The Vanara leaders then somehow managed to check the monkeys and reminded them of Ram's invincibility. With heartening arguments, they convinced the monkeys to once more advance against Kumbhakarna. With Angada at their head, the Vanara forces turned again to face the mighty Rakshasa. Thousands of monkeys rushed in a body at Kumbhakarna, but he swept them aside with his pike. He ran about crushing and devouring the monkeys, even as Garuda would devour serpents. With great difficulty, the monkeys remained standing in the forefront of the battle. Waves of other Rakshasas rushed forward in support of Kumbhakarna, roaring in joy. The battle raged furiously, with Kumbhakarna wreaking havoc among the monkey army, the powerful Dvidvida. Dvidvida. We know about him, right? Hurled an immense boulder at Kumbhakarna. The Rakshasa evaded the rock, and it fell among the other Rakshasas, crushing chariots, horses, and elephants, along with hundreds of demons. The Rakshasa warriors fought back, severing the heads of the yelling monkeys with their deadly arrows. Hanuman leaped into the air and rained down rocks and trees upon Kumbhakarna's head. The Rakshasa fended off the missiles with his pike. Hanuman, who had grown to huge proportions, came down on the ground and stood firmly in front of Kumbhakarna. He smashed him on the breast with a mountain peak, and the Rakshasa reeled back in pain. Quickly recovering, the Rakshasa struck Hanuman a terrible blow with his pike. The monkey was rendered almost senseless, and he fell back, vomiting blood. Since seeing Hanuman thrown down, the Rakshasa forces cheered loudly, and the monkeys fled in fear. Nila quickly came forward and rallied the troops. He took up a great boulder and flung it violently at Kumbhakarna. The Rakshasa saw it coming and smashed it to pieces with his fist, sending up a shower of flames and sparks. 5 huge monkey chiefs then attacked Kumbhakarna from all sides. They struck him with crags, trees, and palms of their hands and their feet. They climbed up his legs and tore at him with their nails and teeth. Then hundreds of other monkeys rushed at the Rakshasa and leaped upon him. Kumbhakarna plucked the monkeys from his body and thrust them into his huge open mouth. What a battle. Monkeys were seen to issue out of his nostrils and his ears as the demon repeatedly thrust them into his mouth. Kumbhakarna looked like death incarnate, appearing for the destruction of all living beings. One by one, the powerful monkey leaders assailed him and were repulsed. Sugriva took up a great mountain top and boldly challenged the Rakshasa. "See now my prowess, O Rakshasa. Leave aside the other monkeys and face me. With this mountain peak I shall dash you to the ground." The Rakshasa laughed. "I know you, monkey. You are the grandson of Brahma and the son of the mighty Riksharaj. Thus you stand there roaring. Show me the limits of your strength." Sugriva immediately hurled the vast crag upon the demon's chest. It smashed to pieces and fell to the earth. But the Rakshasa was hardly moved. In a rage, he threw his flaming pike at Sugriva, but Hanuman intercepted it as it flew. The monkey placed the pike across his knees and broke it in two, making the Vanara troops roar with joy. That was pretty good. Kumbhakarna became maddened. He stormed across the Malaya mountain and tore from it a massive peak. Spinning around, the Rakshasa hurled it at Sugriva. The Monkey King was caught by the whirling crag and fell unconscious. The Rakshasas shouted in triumph, thinking Sugriva to be slain. Kumbhakarna quickly ran over and took up the fallen monkey. Pressing him under his arm, the demon made his way back to the city. If Sugriva were killed or captured, then the entire monkey army would be finished. As the Rakshasa stepped over the city wall, he was greeted by cheering citizens. They showered flowers and scented water on him. Sugriva felt the cool water on his face, and he regained consciousness. He saw himself being carried towards Ravana's palace. Bending his body violently, Sugriva spun around and ripped off the demon's ear with his nails. He then bit off the end of his nose and clawed his side. Kumbhakarna roared in pain and threw the monkey down. Sugriva bounced up like a ball. He sprang upon a rooftop and quickly bounded over the city wall and back to the monkeys. Kumbhakarna stood with blood running down his face. He screamed in anger and turned back toward the battle, holding a terrible-looking mace. Rushing into the monkey forces, he continued annihilating them by the thousands. Lakshmana then appeared. I was waiting for when's Lakshmana going to come. Phew. appeared before the Rakshasa, he immediately shot 24 flaming arrows into Kumbhakarna's arms. The prince continuously released arrows which covered Kumbhakarna on all sides like a golden cloud. Brushing aside the shafts, the Rakshasa laughed and spoke to Lakshmana. "You have shown me your prowess, O prince. I am impressed with your valor. Even Indra and Yamaraj would not dare to face me in an encounter, but I wish to fight only with Ram. Where is your brother? By slaying him, I shall put an end to this conflict. My army will then finish the rest of the monkeys." Ram heard the Rakshas's haughty challenge. He called out, "Stand ready for battle," and shot from a distance a number of arrows that pierced the huge demon all over. Kumbhakarna at once rushed towards him, clutching his mighty mace. Ram sent volleys of arrows which shattered the Rakshas's mace, even as he raised it for Ram's destruction. Shafts, bedecked with golden feathers, thudded into the demon's body by the thousands. Blood poured from his wounds like streams from a mountain. Kumbhakarna ran about in fury, crushing monkeys and demons alike. He seized hold of a tremendous rock and flung it at Ram. The prince released sharp-pointed arrows which smashed the crag as it flew towards him. The pieces of the rock killed 200 Rakshasas as the shards fell to earth. Shards, like pieces of rock, I guess. Thousands of monkeys rushed at Kumbhakarna and leaped upon him, trying to drag him down, but the Rakshasa shook them off like so many insects. He dashed about, intoxicated with battle and slaying both friend and foe. Ram, determined that the time to kill him had arrived. Firmly grasping his bow, he called out, "Take heart and fight, O Lord of the Rakshasas. Know me, Peter, the destroyer of the Rakshasa race. You will now be slain by me." Kumbhakarna whirled around and faced Ram, but suddenly Vibhishan came between them with mace in hand. Seeing him there, Kumbhakarna said, "Yes, my brother, come forward and strike me at once. Abandon all filial affection and remain devoted to the duty of a warrior. O Vibhishan, you alone are the redeemer of our race. Among the Rakshasas, you are the best knower of virtue. Indeed, I will not slay you today, for you deserve protection at my hand. Stand aside. I cannot check my nature and am given to wanton killing all creatures." Vibhishan replied, "With the interest of my race in mind, I always rendered advice to Ravan. Neglected by him, I sought Ram's shelter. Hence, I stand before you in battle today." Tears sprang to Vibhishan's eyes as he spoke. Ram consoled him and told him to stand aside. The time for Kumbhakarna's destruction had come. Seeing Ram standing firmly before him, Kumbhakarna laughed hideously and said, "I am neither Virada nor Kabanda, nor am I Kara, Dushan, Vali, or Maricha. I am Kumbhakarna, arrived here as your death. Do not hold me in contempt. Show me the full limit of your power, and I shall then devour you, O Ram." Ram at once released arrows which flew with the speed of lightning and struck the Rakshasa's body. Those arrows, which had formerly pierced seven sal trees and the very earth itself, did not even shake the demon. I remember reading that. That's like, the Rakshasa took up a massive club and whirled it about, knocking down Ram's arrows as they flew. Laughing again and again, Kumbhakarna stood with his great club uplifted. Ram released an arrow imbued with the force of Vayu. It roared through the air and severed the Rakshas's arm. That arm, still clutching the club, fell to the earth and killed 1,000 monkeys and Rakshasas. Kumbhakarna shrieked with pain, making the sky vibrate and the mountains break open. He looked like a mountain whose summit had been cut off with a gigantic sword. With his remaining arm, he tore up a large palmyra tree and rushed towards Ram. With each step, the earth vibrated and trees toppled over in distant forests. Ram released another mystic missile, which cut off Rakshas's other arm. It fell with an enormous crash, sending the Rakshasas and monkeys scattering in all directions. With blood spurting from the stumps of his arms, the Rakshasa continued to rush at Ram. He bellowed furiously, and the monkeys covered their ears, unable to tolerate the noise. Ram shot a pair of crescent-headed arrows imbued with the force of Indra's thunderbolt, and they severed the Rakshas's feet. Not deterred, Kumbhakarna still somehow moved swiftly toward the prince. His mouth was wide open and emitted savage, deafening cries which shook the earth. In an instant, Ram filled his mouth with arrows, and the demon was silenced. Ram then took up an arrow which was encrusted with gems and which shone brilliantly, empowering it with the force of the Brahmastra. He released it for Kumbhakarna's destruction. As it flew with terrible speed, the arrow illuminated all directions. Like a blazing comet descending to earth, it tore off the Rakshas's head, which looked like a peak of the Himalaya mountains. Adorned with a pair of blazing gold earrings, his head shone as it was carried through the air by the force of Brahma's weapon. It seemed like the rising moon moving through the heavens. It fell upon the defensive wall of Lanka and demolished the great northern gate. The head then rolled along the royal highway. Oh, wow. Pretty gory. By the power of Brahma's mystic missile, the Rakshasa's body was lifted and thrown into the ocean, creating a tidal wave which swept the coast of Lanka. Hosts of gods and rishis assembled in the sky and joyously praised Ram. The monkeys surrounded him, roaring in exultation. All the remaining Rakshasas fled, astonished and dismayed. Ram felt elated and shone brilliantly amid the monkeys, even as the sun shines after an eclipse. So that's, Jai or Vijay. Now we still have Ravana left. Chapter 9. Carnage among the Rakshasas. The Rakshasas ran quickly to Ravana and told him the news. Quote, "After wreaking havoc among the monkeys for some time, your glorious brother has been slain by Ram. His limbless and headless trunk lies half submerged in the sea, and his head now blocks the city's main gate." Ravana was shocked, and seized by grief, he fainted. I don't know if Valmiki Ramayana says he fainted, but this says he fainted. All around him, his sons and other relatives sent up a wail of sorrow. They could not believe their ears. How could the invincible Kumbhakarna be killed by a mere human? Gradually, Ravana came around and began to lament. "Alas, my brother, where have you gone? Without removing the thorn from my side, how have you left me alone? What use now is my kingdom or Sita or even life itself? I am deprived of my right arm, depending on which I had no fear from the assembled gods headed by Indra. Now those gods stand in the sky, raising shouts of joy. I cannot brook," that's process, I guess, accept this turn of events. I shall follow the path trodden by my brother. Either I shall slay Ram, or death may claim me too. Ravana wept and tossed about in agony. He remembered Vibhishan's advice. His virtuous brother had spoken wisely. He had been wrongly expelled from Lanka. Now Ravana was tasting the bitter fruit of that action. One who ignores the good advice of wise well-wishers always comes to grief. It's one of those sayings in Ramayana that you put on your wall or your refrigerator or on your forehead or something. One who ignores the good advice of wise well-wishers always comes to grief. The Rakshasa king sank down in distress. Seeing him fallen into abject sorrow, his son, Devantaka, who was not very thoughtful, said, "Why are you lamenting in this way, O king? Those endowed with power and valor do not give way to grief. The time has come for firm action, not lamentation. Only command me, and I shall go out and exterminate your enemies." Ravana's other sons were heartened by Devantaka's words. They also began boasting of their power. All of them clamored for the order to fight. They were all mighty in battle and had never experienced defeat. All of them knew the mystic missiles, and all had received various boons from their practices of asceticism. Bragging loud, they declared that they would all go out together and finish Ram and the monkeys in no time. Ravana was encouraged. Driven by his destiny, the demon stood up and embraced his sons, ordering them to march out for battle. 4 of the Rakshasa sons, Trishira, Devantaka, Narantaka, and Atikaya, along with 2 of his half-brothers, Mahaparshva and Mahodara, that's 6, were dispatched for the fight. Those gigantic warriors anointed themselves with medicinal herbs capable of warding off injuries, as well as with perfumes and sandalwood paste. They put on golden armor and took up their fierce weapons. Mahodara mounted an elephant that resembled a dark cloud. Trishira mounted a fine chariot drawn by the best of horses and equipped with thousands of weapons. Atikaya, who stood with a flaming crown on his head, mounted another superb chariot. On either side of him stood Devantaka and Narantaka, clutching frightful maces, both of them appearing like Vishnu holding the Mandara mountain. Mahaparshva came behind them, mounted upon another elephant, which resembled Airavata, the carrier of Indra. They came out of the western gate of Lanka like 6 brilliant planets suddenly appearing in the heavens. Followed by the massed ranks of Rakshasa warriors, they raised their weapons and rushed joyfully toward the monkey army. The monkeys saw them advancing like a row of dark clouds. The earth shook and the sky resounded with their roars. Drums crashed and conches blew, filling the 4 quarters with a deafening clamor. The Vanara army thundered in response and took up crags and tree trunks. The 2 armies met with a clash, and a terrible, confused fight ensued. Demons and monkeys gave out lion-like roars as they assailed one another with fury. The monkeys sprang high, dragging down the airborne Rakshasas and dashing them to the earth. They smashed the demons with rocks and pounded them with their fists and feet. The Rakshasas sent volley after volley of arrows at the monkeys. They whirled their spiked maces and swords, viciously hacking down the enemy troops. The monkeys picked up one Rakshasa to strike another, and the Rakshasa did the same with the monkeys. Arrows with crescent or horseshoe heads sped through the air and lopped off arms, legs, and heads. It's hard to read this. Really, really brutal. Narantaka set up a tremendous roar and began carving a path deep into the monkey army. He left a trail of flesh and blood strewn with mountain-like monkeys lying stretched on the ground. The demon sundered the ranks of his enemy, piercing them with his spear and killing dozens at a time. The monkeys howled in fear as Narantaka fought with a maniacal fury. None could face him. Seeing the awful destruction being wrought by Narantaka, Angada came forward. He shouted to the demon, "Wait! Why are you showing your strength against ordinary monkeys? Throw your spear, which strikes like lightning, at my breast." Narantaka spun around and glared at Angada. He hurled his great flaming spear at the monkey, who stood firmly before him. The spear broke against Angada's chest and fell to the ground. Wow. Angada leaped forward and dealt a blow to the head of the Rakshas's horse. The horse's feet sank deeply into the ground and its eyes popped out. Oh, gosh. Gentle people reading stuff like this just doesn't work. I'm trying to get into it, but it's difficult. Oh boy. Narantaka jumped off the back of his slain horse and roared in anger. He struck Angada a terrible blow on the side of his head. The monkey vomited hot blood and fell back dazed. Crouching down and regaining his senses, Angada, who was thinking only of Ram, suddenly sprang forward. He swung his fist with all his might and hit the Rakshasa on the chest. Narantaka's breast was split asunder by that blow. He sank to the ground with his limbs soaked in blood and gave up his life. One down and 3 to go. The monkeys set up a cry of joy, and the gods beat their heavenly drums, observing Angada's incredible feat. Even Ram was struck with wonder. Angada stood infused with vigor, ready to continue the battle. Seeing his brother killed, Devantaka cried loudly with grief and fury. He gazed with bloodshot eyes at Angada, followed by Trishira and Mahodara. He rushed toward the son of Vali, releasing thousands of arrows. Angada immediately seized a huge tree and swept aside all the arrows. He then hurled the tree at Devantaka, but it was torn to pieces by the arrows of Trishira, standing close behind him. Angada threw 3 trees and rocks, threw trees and rocks one after another. Mahodara whirled his club and shattered them as they flew toward him. Suddenly, the 3 powerful Rakshasas rushed simultaneously at Angada. Each of them struck him furiously with their clubs. Angada stood his ground, tolerating the blows. He leaped toward Mahodara and struck the Rakshas's elephant with his palm. The elephant fell to its knees and toppled over. Angada then tore out a tusk from the dead elephant and struck Devantaka a terrific blow on the head. The demon reeled about, vomiting blood. Gosh. It's not like a rasa dance or something. Or the cowherd boys playing with Krishna in the pastures. It's a little different. Okay. Hanuman saw Angada engaged with the 3 towering Rakshasas, and he ran over to assist the prince. Nila also rushed to Angada's aid, hurling a mountain peak at Trishira, but the Rakshasa smashed the massive crag with his arrows. Devantaka swung his club in a full circle and caught the running Hanuman on his breast. Not minding that blow, although it was forceful enough to have rent the earth, Hanuman swung his fist at the Rakshasa. He caught him on his head with a crack resembling a peal of thunder. The demon's teeth and eyes were forced out and his skull shattered. He fell like a tree cut at its root. Hanuman roared loudly and sprang at Trishira. He clawed at the Rakshas's massive steed, even as a lion would claw an elephant. Trishira took up a terrible javelin and hurled it straight at Hanuman. The monkey immediately caught it and snapped it in two. Trishira lifted his sword and thrust it at Hanuman, piercing him in the breast. Not shaken by the wound, Hanuman struck the Rakshasa a blow on the breast with his palm. Trishira fell unconscious, and his sword slipped from his grasp. Hanuman snatched his sword and roared. The demon regained his consciousness, awakened by Hanuman's roar. He could not tolerate the sound and leaped up furiously, striking the monkey with his fist. Hanuman seized the Rakshasa by his hair, which was covered by a diadem, a crown. Pulling the demon's head toward him, Hanuman severed it with the demon's own sword. Even as Hanuman was slaying Trishira, Nila killed Mahodara with a tremendous blow from a fully grown sal tree. The mountain-like monkey Rishabha then engaged in a fierce fight with Mahaparshva. The two combatants rendered each other unconscious again and again. Finally, Rishabha pounded the Rakshasa to death with the demon's own mace. That left one more. Seeing 5 of their heroes killed in duels with the monkeys, the Rakshasas fled in all directions, resembling an ocean that has burst its shores. The demon, Atikaya, then came to the forefront of the battle and rallied the terrified Rakshasas. As the huge-bodied demon advanced, the monkeys ran away howling. They thought that Kumbhakarna had somehow returned to life. Surrounding Ram, they cried for protection. Ram saw in the distance Atikaya, who resembled a great mountain. Amazed at this sight, Ram turned to Vibhishan and asked, "Who is that monstrous Rakshasa seated in a chariot drawn by 1,000 horses? Surrounded by flaming pikes, he seems like a dark cloud, encircled by lightning flashes. Indeed, with his golden bows on all sides of the shining chariot, he is illuminating the battlefield like a newly risen sun. His blazing arrows, going in all directions, are like so many sunbeams. Tell me the name of this lion-like warrior." Vibhishan replied that this was Ravana's son, a powerful fighter who had performed much asceticism and had thus acquired from Brahma different boons. The creator of the universe had made him invincible to gods and demons and bestowed upon him many mystical weapons, as well as the wonderful chariot he was now driving. With his arrows, the demon had even checked Indra's thunderbolt and cut down Varuna's noose. Vibhishan advised Ram to tackle him at once before he annihilated the entire army of monkeys. Ram watched as Atikaya penetrated into the monkey ranks. At once he was surrounded by Nila, Dvidvida, Mainda, Kumuda, and Sarabha, 5 great heroes among the monkeys. They assailed the Rakshasa from all sides, hurling huge rocks and trees at him. The demon easily repulsed all of their missiles with his arrows, which were bedecked with bright red jewels. He pierced all 5 of the monkeys and sent them running, including Nila. The demon struck fear into the monkey army as a furious lion would terrify a flock of deer. He looked around and saw Ram. Leaving aside the monkeys, the Rakshasa drove across to Ram and issued a proud challenge. I do not care to fight with common warriors. If you have the courage and the strength, then stand against me today. I shall soon end your power and your fame." Hearing this, Lakshman was infuriated. He seized his bow and twanged the string, making a sound which reverberated all around the battlefield. Lakshmana gazed at Atikaya with bloodshot eyes, placing a long shaft on his bow. The demon laughed derisively. "How do you dare to challenge me, O son of Sumitra? You are only a boy, unskilled in warfare. I cannot be faced by the Himalayan mountain, nor even the earth itself. You seek to rouse the fire of universal destruction as it slumbers peacefully. Do not lose your life in this way. Depart swiftly, or if you choose to stand here, then be prepared for my arrows, which will quaff your life blood, even as a lion would quaff the blood of a deer." Lakshman could not tolerate Atikaya's arrogant words. He thundered back at the Rakshasa. "Mere speech does not prove your prowess, O demon. Give up this empty boasting and demonstrate your strength at once. After you send at me the best of your arrows and missiles, I will strike your head off, even as the wind blows a ripe fruit from a tree. Whether I am old or young is of no matter. You should know me as your death. Arrived here today, the three worlds were taken by Vishnu even while he was yet a child." Atikaya flared up in anger. He instantly fired an arrow which flew at the speed of the wind, resembling a meteor and shooting tongues of fire. Lakshmana loosened his one arrow, which intercepted Atikaya's in mid-flight and split it in two. Atikaya grew even more enraged and fitted 5 more arrows to his bow, sending them at Lakshmana in a moment. Again, Lakshmana cut down his shafts as they sped toward him. One more page. Lakshmana seized a sharpened arrow which shone with splendor. Pulling his bow into a full circle, he released the shaft, and it pierced the demon in the brow. Atikaya shook like a mountain in an earthquake. Profuse blood ran down his head like oxides exuding from a mountain. The Rakshasa praised Lakshmana's feat. He quickly sent 24 arrows at the prince, which seemed to light up the sky, but Lakshmana struck all of them down. Seizing his opportunity as Lakshmana parried the arrows, Atikaya sent another fierce shaft, which struck the prince on the breast. Lakshmana bled profusely, but pulled out the arrow and tossed it aside. He then charged an arrow with the force of the Agnyastra, the powerful fire weapon. Seeing the arrow loosened for his destruction and blazing in the sky, Atikaya responded with an arrow imbued with the power of the sun god. The two mystic missiles met in mid-space, like 2 blazing planets colliding in the heavens. Reduced to ashes, they both fell to the earth. Whew. Like Star Wars. Atikaya fired at Lakshmana, a weapon presided over by Yamaraj. But the prince countered it with a missile empowered by the force of the wind god. Lakshmana quickly responded by covering the son of Ravana with countless arrows, so that neither the demon nor his chariot were visible. Sweeping away those areas with a sword, the demon did not feel at all harassed. He shot a deadly arrow at Lakshman, which hit him in the chest and caused the prince to faint for some moments. Regaining consciousness, he shot razor-headed arrows, which cut deep down into the demon's standard. He killed the charioteer and several rows of the Rakshas's horses, but although he struck the demon's body with innumerable arrows, he could not hurt him in the least. As Lakshman stood confounded, the wind god Vayu approached him and said, "The demon is clad in an impenetrable armor. bestowed upon him by Brahma himself. Indeed, the Rakshasa cannot be slain except with Brahma's weapon. Hearing the celestial voice, Lakshmana took out a large golden arrow and fitted it to his bow. He recited the incantations to invoke Brahma's missile. As he chanted the mantras, the sky seemed to shake and the earth groaned. With that arrow on his full stretched bow, Lakshmana appeared like death incarnate. He released the arrow and it sped with a terrible cracking sound toward the demon. Atikaya saw the diamond-bedecked arrow approaching him, blazing like the midday sun. The demon was struck with fear. Moving with blinding speed, he hurled javelins, spears, pikes, maces, and axes at the arrow. He also struck it with numerous arrows of his own, but the shaft could not be checked. It baffled the demon's weapons and continued to course swiftly through the air. A blazing arrow caught Atikaya in the neck, severing his head and throwing it some distance onto the battlefield. Whew. Last paragraph. When Ravana's son was slain, the remaining Rakshasas sent up a wail, crying in discordant tones. They ran out of fear, unable to find a protector. They turned their faces toward the city and hastily retreated. The monkeys surrounded Lakshmana and praised him, shouting with joy. The prince smiled and returned to Ram's side. Ram embraced his brother and glorified his wondrous feat. Flowers fell from the sky and heavenly drums sounded. End of chapter. No wonder I haven't read this section. It's like too hard to read. Especially trying to read it like a dramatic reading. It's for Kshatriyas it's probably something like yummy, but for others it's as we said yesterday, because it was also a battle scene. Battles, even divine battles, they're not nice. Vinashaya Chaduskritam. A Kshatriya force is needed because the demoniac force, without it, can be too much. That's what the demigods themselves appealed to Vishnu. Brahma himself appealed to Vishnu. Brahma, who's given all these powers to all these different persons, appealed to Vishnu. Help. The personality of Godhead has ways to remove, let's just say, demoniac persons without this kind of a scene. So this kind of a scene has its place for his own favor. From a rasa point of view, chivalry is one of the characteristics of the Supreme Lord. So when he, wants chivalry, who's going to give him a tussle? So he he needs really suitable people for that tussle. Now, unfortunate is that so many Vanaras were killed. The fortunate is Ram brought them back to life. They didn't give up their life in vain. Now, what it means to be engaged in the Lord's service like this, that's service. For those that are Kshatriya spirited, that's a nice service. For those that are Brahminically inclined, that's not a nice service. But, it's according to inclination, different services. So that's one way of, at least for me, to understand, why this horrible, bloody, gory scene. Persons who are Kshatriya spirited, to give them some suitable service. Okay. Let's see if there's any discussion. Thank you. I don't know who's going to want to say something. You have something to add?
I have one question.
Okay. This too is for the online people. Use the microphone.
Maharaj, how many days the war happened?
Aha. That was one of the questions. That was his question.
Oh, okay.
And the way that it was responded to is there are two different opinions, and we're looking in a possible third. In Padma Purana, by the way, just a comment on the Padma Purana reference. In Padma Purana, it speaks of Ram, Lakshman, and Bharat and Shatrughna as the Supreme Lord and his various weapons, as incarnations of his weapons. Whereas in the Bhagavatam, it's Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So one might say those are different days of Brahma. But so at least in Padma Purana, it speaks of the duration of the battle lasting for 87 days with a 15-day interval. The details I don't know, because a researcher came up with that. And it gives, which day of the moon during which month it began, which day of the moon during which month it ended. 87 days. That's Padma Purana. Then there's another researcher that from using Valmiki Ramayana says it lasts for 13 days. But there's a discrepancy according to this particular commentator. It's like an article, a document that he wrote that says the lunar day that the battle began and the lunar day during which month that the battle ended, similar to Padma Purana. And this devotee that came across this article happens to know astrology. So, and he knows that over the passage of time, there's a shift of when the moon passes through different nakshatras. I don't know the technical, how it works. But this devotee said that according to Rupa Goswami's Rupa Goswami's Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Ram appears in the 24th Yuga cycle of Vaivasvata Manu. And this is the 28th Yuga cycle of Vaivasvata Manu. So there's several Yuga cycles in between. And through passage of time, the movements of the moon through the nakshatras may shift. So he's going to do some further research and some calculations and get back to us. So one report is, and what this article says doesn't match what we're accustomed to observing, the day that Ram was slain, which marks the end of the battle. So it's possible that through the shifting of the movements of the moon to the nakshatras over periods of time, there's some algorithm that helps determine that. Without going into it too much, he's going to do some further research, but that's what we came up with so far. Okay.
Maharaj, one more question.
Yeah.
So out of this 14 years exile, how many years Sita Mata and Ram lived together before the
13 years, almost 13.
Oh, okay, in the last year.
Yes, because when she was taken, she was given a year. If she didn't submit, he would, finish her. And as soon as the war was over, and it did take some time for the funerals and stuff, but they had to hurry back because Bharata was going to take his life at the end of the 14 years if Ram didn't return. Remember that? So around 13 years, they were together in the forest before Sita was kidnapped. Now, one of the renderings that I read said 12 and a half. But, somewhere between 12 and a half and 13. And that's just allowing for, the funerals and all that stuff that have happened after the Ravan was slain. Haribol. Yeah, just let me have it. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
How about your daughter? You have any question? Do you like... What's that?
This is Ramayana.
You have a Bhagavad Gita question?
No. She's asking whether the reference is from Bhagavad Gita. It's from
Ramayana. Ramayana.
Thank you, Maharaj.
You want to hear something nice? Something nice? There's a devotee that really likes Ramayana, and this can be of benefit for the community around here. For the this past weekend, this is for your benefit now. This past weekend there was some functions to help bring awareness of a temple that's being built, a $4-point-something million, whatever it is, temple in Naperville. And they have a third of it already gathered and so forth. So the different community leaders, this group, that group, the other group came together. One of the themes of their discussion, because a lot of it was discussion, question, answer kind of thing, they're concerned about their children, the next generation, and, things that everyone thinks about that has children. So in response, one of the ideas is during the summer, there will be a class once a week for, I don't know what the age group is going to be, for sections from Ramayana, like Dasarath's discussion with Kaikeyi, for example, in that exchange, and the lessons to be learned. Ram's discussion with Vali, and the lessons to be learned. Ram's discussion with Lakshman when Sita was gone, the lessons to be learned. So different, so whatever the number is, 20, 25, whatever the number is, for the kids and during their summer, an hour on a weekend, and just hear Ramayana, and hear key passages from Ramayana. So the messages, the story will be narrated. I hope they're not going to go into the battle scenes. And, So the kids can receive the culture that comes from hearing the stories of virtuous Ram and his exchanges with others. So when that information is spread around, persons here are also welcome. I don't know the age group that's planned. How old are you? 10? 6. You're 6.
She's going to be 7 in another 10 days.
You're going to be 7 in 10 days? Okay. Anything else?
Maharaj, general observation hearing the war scene, the monkeys don't seem to have their own weapons. They use tree trunks.
Yeah,
and
that was
fists
said at the
and-
beginning.
Yeah. That was one. And the other question I had was, is there any disappearance pastime of Lord Ram, like
Yes.
Krishna?
We visited the place by the Sarayu River. And I was trying to remember that this morning, but you can listen to the recordings of the Ayodhya Yatra. And after, as I recall, 60,000 years, Ram announced, we're going. And, ensemble, they entered I forget exactly how it happened. They entered the river and then ascended into the Vaikuntha realm.
And same with his brothers and Sita also?
Well, Sita's already went separately.
Okay.
But Hanuman stayed back.
Question from Sanchari Dasi. Guru Maharaj, when you were speaking on the on the Gori battle and how it is a manifestation of the rasa of chivalry,
Yeah.
I was wondering, how does this rasa manifest in the spiritual realm? I've learned that in Goloka, demons don't actually exist, and the pastime is just conducted to increase the surrender and love of the residents. But here, the sweetness seems to be in the actual battle, as it was the service of the Vanaras. How does it work in Lord Rama's planet?
No battles.
I had a question, Maharaj. It was interesting to note how Angada was explaining the divinity of Lord Ram when all the monkeys were backing out, when all the Vanaras were backing out. Initially, we were having that discussion.
Yeah.
Just in our day-to-day services, if we are working along with new devotees who are coming for a particular service to the temple or for a program, whatever it is, what would be something nice to keep in our mind to keep motivating them, or if we observe that they are backing out, something that we can tell them that'll stay motivated and complete the course?
Well, first of all, Krishna Dharma's telling of Ramayana is not Valmiki telling of Ramayana. There are places where Valmiki does speak of Ram's divinity, but it's only in very special places. And Krishna Dharma takes some license and expresses it where Valmiki doesn't. But, that's not your main question. That was just a reference point. Questions like this, it might, standard answer is it depends. And the most important factor is the relationship with the person. I mean, where the person is at, where you're at, and your relationship with the person, where that relationship is at. So depending upon those three interrelated factors, a choice can be made. But some choices might range from comforting, reminding that, it's not just dependent upon our own ability. We're dependent upon Krishna's mercy. Let's make our very best effort. What would it be like if on the other side we were to lament, oh, we didn't persevere. We didn't give it a full try. We didn't give Krishna the opportunity to use us as his instrument. Take 3 steps back and say, why are we doing this anyway? What is it that we're trying to achieve? We can't do this on our own anyways. That Krishna may be testing our determination. Let us show Krishna how we are determined, regardless. You don't be attached to the result. So much depends upon the person and the dynamic and the relationship. And sometimes it is good to take some steps back. Give a pause and do some refresh and enter again into the required service or whatever. So very dependent upon so many variables. And if it's simply weak-heartedness, then that's a little easier. So some people, just need to be reminded and feel encouraged. Yeah, you're right. And so it depends. Okay. Anything else online? That's it. So if there's nothing else in the room, we're battled out for tonight. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.